When you hear the phrase Ponzi scheme, you may think of the man it's named after, Charles Ponzi, the Italian con artist. But you probably think of the more infamous man known as the monster of Wall Street, Mr. Bernie Madoff. When a person or entity has others invest into a project or business, the investors rightfully assume after some time that they'll see an ROI, or return on investment. But when the investee uses the funds from new investors to pay previous investors, as if funds are coming from profit generated by the business or project when they're really not, the operation becomes what we know as a Ponzi scheme. This type of scheme collapses when the number of new investors slows or when too many investors want to cash out. But what does that have to do with homeowners associations? After the Second World War, the golden age of capitalism began thanks to the large economic boom that happened. This led to urban sprawl and the beginnings of suburbanization in America, where many found themselves in a burgeoning middle class that could have a stable job, have a family, and own property. Charles Marone, author of Strong Towns, notes that this sudden abandonment of how we used to build and develop was odd. He says, in a way, this was an odd thing for such a pragmatic generation, having been conditioned on financial depression, scarcity, and war to undertake. But like a starving man who, when suddenly given a buffet of food, doesn't think of the consequences of gorging himself, Americans never stop to think about the future of their actions. When a local government plans to develop more land, initially much of the financial burden is on others. For example, for the extension of water and sewage lines, the state or federal government may provide assistance in the way of grants or low-interest loans. If highways, overpasses, or traffic signals are needed, the Department of Transportation will step in and absorb a large portion of the cost. And when developers begin building a community, much of the upfront investment is on them and the homeowners that take out loans and mortgages for the community. However, when the dust is settled, it is the local government that remains responsible for the long-term maintenance of the newly built infrastructure, as long as it's public. The upkeep of things like public roads, parks, water treatment centers, and more will fall to the city or town. But you may think, this should be fine. This is what I pay my taxes for. And you'd be right to a point. Let's take a look at a few case studies by Strong Towns. A small, rural road needs to be paved. The cost of this project is split 50-50 between the city and the property owners of the road. When it's done, it is expected to last 20 to 25 years. The following question was asked. Based on the taxes paid by the property owners along this road, how long will it take the city to recoup its 50% contribution? The answer was 37 years. By the time the road needs maintenance again, the city will still be 12 years away from recovering its financial investment. Let's take a look at a second case study. Property owners petition a city to take over their road. The owners agree to pay the upfront costs for building the road, as long as the city takes over the maintenance of said road. Again, there is very little the city needs to invest initially. Remembering that the road lasts about 25 years at a maximum, the following question was asked. How much is the repair cost estimated to be after one life cycle, and how does that compare to the amount of revenue these properties will produce over that same period? In that amount of time, the city will collect approximately $79,000 in taxes for that repair, but the repair itself has an estimated $154,000 in costs. That will leave the city with a deficit of $75,000. The city would need roughly another 24 years to recover the remaining amount. By that point, the road will be due for more major repairs. It's mind-blowing that even with all the tax revenue factored, these cities will enter debt when doing needed maintenance on something as simple as roads and streets. Imagine how much worse the bigger problems, like replacing water treatment systems, will be. So, how do these towns and cities typically solve this deficit? Someone might say, simple, raise the taxes. But this isn't feasible because the hike would be too high, almost astronomical in some locations. For example, the city of Bacchus, Minnesota needed a new water treatment system. If the public were to subsidize a $3.3 million project, that would equal $27,000 per household, which is also the median household income for that area. This is where we circle back to the idea of a Ponzi scheme. Let's take a look at one life cycle of a street in a new development. Assuming that all tax revenue is being properly allocated and set aside for the upcoming maintenance, it's still not enough to save the city from going into debt in the 25th year. So what can the city do? When a con artist needs to pay an old investor, what do? They bring on a new investor and use the funds collected to pay off their debt. Similarly, the city, knowing they will have a short-term cash advantage, will approve the construction of that new development next door. The immediate tax revenue collected will cover the cost of repairs in the old development, and the city can breathe again. Suddenly, the graph looks like this. Perfect. Except we all know that eventually all Ponzi schemes fail. You may not know when, but it is simply a waiting game. Assuming the best case scenario, that the city continues its growth and development at the same steady rate, the graph starts to look a little different after 2 life cycles. As is the case in a regular Ponzi scheme, the higher you climb, the farther you fall. Of course, cities and towns aren't doing this on purpose. Instead, this is the result of no one considering the long-term ramifications of urban sprawl. So it's reasonable to conclude that as cities and towns spiral into debt over repairs and maintenance of developments that shouldn't have been there in the first place, local governments will do their best to offset their debt. That's where your friendly neighborhood HOA comes in, and you become an investor in the whole scheme. While some local governments strongly support HOAs, more are beginning to mandate them for new developers. Evan McKenzie, author of the book Privatopia, Homeowners Associations and the Rise of Residential Private Government, states, "It's the most dramatic privatization of local government services that we've ever seen. For the underfunded cities and towns, HOAs are the solution to their money problems. This privatizes all the infrastructure associated with servicing those new neighborhoods. Towns, cities, and utility companies alike love this strategy. However, the future financial burden is unwittingly assumed by the new homeowners purchasing in HOAs located in that town. They are paying taxes, which are subsidizing pre-existing town or city infrastructure, and they're paying HOA dues, which subsidizes their neighborhood or community's infrastructure. The town is double dipping, and the new homeowners are assuming double the liability. But what if the monthly or quarterly dues still aren't enough for a particular project? The financial sum of these problems will land squarely on the homeowners in the community in the form of a special assessment. One Redditor says, "My wife and I bought our first property weeks before our first child was born. We got a special assessment for our HOA 3 months after settling in. That special assessment came in for $90,000 per unit in Issaquah, Washington. We were forced to pay $46,000 at the beginning of December of the last year, right before Christmas. 'Tis the season. We had to borrow $23,000 from my father and $23,000 from my aunt, and we were having serious trouble paying them back, because the way they're coming up with the remainder of the cost is doubling our HOA dues from $500 to $1,000 per month. And keep in mind that this is solely for HOA dues." Another Redditor, titling their post, "$12,000 special assessment," states, "They're so kind to break up the payments into 2 installments of $6,000 in 90 days. About half of the units are rented out on Airbnb or Vrbo. I'm scared most of the owners are wealthy multiple unit owners and can just eat this expense. We're trying to raise a family in our 1 unit and sometimes struggled to pay the high HOA fees. It would be smart for new home buyers to just avoid HOAs altogether, and while it's possible, this is becoming increasingly difficult as a lot of new homes being built fall under the governance of one. According to the U.S. Census, about 82% of newly built homes in 2021 were part of an HOA. This shows the modern homebuyer that as much as they may hate them, HOAs are here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. As with most things regarding HOAs, it's not a great solution. It's just a less bad solution for an even worse problem. So what's a better solution? Is there something that can be done to reverse the growing trend of homeowners associations? Unfortunately, here at Paladin, we don't have the answer to that. Instead, we're doing our best to help homeowners take care of the immediate battles they're fighting within their HOAs. But we do believe that a long-term solution is needed. Much of our research for this video was mined from Strong Towns, a nonprofit organization that seeks to help local municipalities build better places to live and reverse the effects of what they call the suburban experiment. If you're interested in learning more about Strong Towns, its mission, or its founder, Charles Marone, links to the website and articles used in this video are below in the description. And if you're a homeowner desperately in need of short-term solutions for your HOA, reach out to us for help through our website, also linked below in the description. We'll be coming out with more videos like this one soon, so we'd love for you to stick around. Like the video, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're notified whenever a new video comes out. And because we'd love your thoughts, yes, even the ones just stating that you hate HOAs, feel free to leave a comment below.